Permits for housing starts in Toronto and prices in Vancouver among the highest in North America. We're making waves this week. Time to ask the agents what this all means. Rick Dhillon is with Royal LePage in Toronto and joins us now. Rick, what do you make of some of the numbers regarding housing starts and permits in Toronto? It's way down, 42%.
Hey, Scott, thank you for having me. Well, yeah, that's definitely a stat that we need to look into, but it's all comes down to demand and why that happened. And we can talk day to day and keep going on why that happens, but I like to talk about how it affects the people. And they're stuck in the speculative state where they're frozen and they don't know what to do, and they're holding on to their money and not coming into the market.
Now, if housing starts are down, it means that builders are saying, you know what, we're not building as many. Could that lead to an even greater supply crunch? I mean, fewer houses, prices go up, no?
Well, I think it all started from demand. I think there's been a lot of outside interference on getting the demand, pausing the demand loan with like the stress tests and the foreign tax market. So in return, then comes a supply issue, when the reality should have been that we can go on for this forever, but the reality should have been that, hey, we live in a buzzing city and it's not going to stop, and we should be looking into putting more money into building more supply so that can meet our demand, instead of doing it the other way around, where we're trying to halt supply, and therefore all this speculation happens. And Scott, the people in Toronto have money to come into the market. It's just that they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and they are scared to come into a market that's constantly changing.
I know that you are primarily a real estate agent in Toronto, but we're seeing some numbers from Vancouver about affordability. It is at the top in terms of unaffordability in North America. What do you read into something like that?
I mean, I think it's about time that we realize that Vancouver, along with Toronto, those are the places that people want to live. And I think that we make a big deal of having these numbers and that it's an expensive place to live. It is, because you're surrounded by mountains, you're surrounded by the ocean. The climate is just fantastic, and people are willing to pay the money to be there.
Now, the people who wrote that study described what they called an insane affordability gap. I mean, does that put pressure on other communities outside Vancouver that also then have to grow because people flee to the suburbs?
Well, I mean, it is. If you look at it, it is. If you look at Vancouver's, the cost of living there, like even compared to Toronto, I was born in Vancouver, go there often, but even compared to, like, when you look at gas and cost of living, like housing, yeah, of course, it is an expensive place to live. But people are going to continue wanting to live there.
We only have about 30 seconds left here, but is Toronto going to follow Vancouver's path in terms of affordability?
Absolutely. It absolutely is, because it's a Manhattanization of Toronto. This is the place to be. If you look at, even if you look at Sidewalk Labs, that's by Google, they're coming here. This is this next Silicon Valley. I mean, this is the Manhattanization of Toronto, and the demand that is being temporarily halted because of the outside interference will just be temporary. Supply is going to have to meet demand one day, and we just are looking for a nice, even market so Mr. and Mrs. Buyer and Mrs. Renter can come into the market, know what they're expecting, and then they can kind of make their plan.
From Royal LePage in Toronto, Rick Dhillon. Rick, thank you very much for joining us.